Welcome to the Den, the Dark Entertainment Network. I'm the Gothic Rose, and you can find me live on TikTok every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And be sure to catch up on Spotify, YouTube, and Welcome to the Den podcast blog on WordPress. Also, you can email me at welcometothedenpodcast@gmail.com if you have a terrifying tale you'd like to share. So right now, we're going to talk about some Mandela effects because this came up during our Christmas dinner because I gave my sister a game. I gave her and her family a game for Christmas. I gave her Perfection. And I know all you Gen Xers out there know and love Perfection. You had to wind the clock and the bass would drop down and it would go tick, 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 tick. And you had to get all those little circles and X's and O's and everything everywhere. And you had to get them all in before the timer went pop and everything went boom. And we, of course, started talking about 80s games. And we were at my mother's house. So I went looking to see if we had an old version of Monopoly. But the only version we had was Millennium Monopoly, and that did not have the Monopoly Man on it. Now, I clearly remember the Monopoly Man monocle, and I swear that I have seen pictures with this monocle in it, but I have not seen it since. And Monopoly said that they came out with some money that had a monocle on the man, like as a special. It was something strange like that. It was a really interesting like explanation, but it really made no sense. So we were talking about that and we were wondering if there is still a Monopoly game out there with the monocle. So I want to know out there, does anyone have this game? Can anyone prove that this Monopoly Man had a monocle? Because it's what I remember, and it's what a lot of other people remember. Now, that goes kind of along with the like old Earth, new Earth thing, where maybe we are in a different timeline, a different reality where a lot of the 80s doesn't exist anymore. So, like the things that we remember as kids seem so far off and far away because they actually no longer exist. Because this is where it all went down. So, a Mandela effect is a phenomenon where a large group of people remember an event or detail differently from how it actually occurred. Now, is it differently from how it actually occurred, or is it two different versions of the same thing from two different timelines? And maybe that old timeline was destroyed. It no longer exists. So we're in the timeline where it doesn't exist, which again, why some of these memories feel so like painful. You know, that's what I think, is because we are remembering something that was destroyed. It was real, but it was destroyed. So the term was coined by researcher Fiona Broom in 2009 after she discovered that she, along with many others like myself, remember Nelson Mandela passing away in prison during the 1980s. However, Nelson Mandela actually passed away in 2013. So in order for this to be true, the Mandela effect, the first one, at least of our lifetime, would have had to occur sometime in the 1980s after Nelson Mandela went to prison. So I believe that I've talked about this before, but I just find it so interesting. So I have to, I have to know everything about this because the origin of the Mandela effect is just as important as all of the Mandela effects surrounding it. We have to get to the root of the issue. What happened? What happened to our timeline? So, Nelson Mandela was born on July 18th, 1918 in the village of Mvezo in Umtata, then part of South Africa's Cape Province. and he was given the forename Roli. Wow, I can't pronounce that. Rolilalha, la, and that meant troublemaker. So Nelson Mandela's name, like nickname, basically was troublemaker. And he began studying law at the University of Witwatersrand. And let's see, he was the only Black African student and faced racism. And there he befriended liberal and communist European, Jewish, and Indian students, among them Joe Slovo and Ruth First. So, becoming increasingly politicized, Nelson Mandela marched in August 1943 in support of a successful bus boycott to reverse fare rises. Joining the ANC, he was increasingly influenced by Sisulu spending time with other activists, including his old friend Oliver Tambo. In 1943, Mandela met Anton Limbibi, an ANC member affiliated with the Africanist branch of African nationalism. So he did all of these things. And then, of course, he was put in prison. Now, sometime in the 80s, so I would say sometime between 1984 and 1988, maybe we were told he died in prison. It's really, really interesting because I remember it. So if you do remember it, leave me some hearts, leave me a comment, let me know that I am not the only one that remembers this. Gen X, I know we're out there. I know some of us remember this. So I'm looking up when he went to prison. And let's see. Nelson Mandela's imprisonment. Because we have to figure this out. We have to get to the root of the Mandela effect. So, why did Nelson Mandela go to prison and how long? He became president of South Africa in the early 1990s, winning the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993 for bringing an end to apartheid. But where is the date? So, he joined the ANC in 1944. Again, they're not telling me the date that he went to prison. So, he was sentenced. So, Nelson Mandela was sentenced to life in prison at a Pretoria court on June 12th, 1964. And he served a total of 27 years in prison by the time he was released in, let's see, first he was released in 1982. That's interesting. Then he was transferred to Capestown Pollsmoor Prison and later Victor Verster Prison on the Western Cape. So his full release happened on February 11th, 1990, and that was a Sunday. So the first time he was freed from prison was 1982, and then he went to another prison until 1990. So I'm thinking that somewhere between 1982 and 1990, we were told he had passed away. And I think it was it was later in the 80s. Later in the 80s. So I would say maybe it was like somewhere between 86 and 88. So that's what I'm thinking. And then let's just see what happened. What big events happened, let's say, in 1986? Let's see. Let's see if we can connect a conspiracy theory. So let's do a live dive. Big events, 1986. And I think I know what we're going to come up with. All right. So let's find out. Major events of 86. Does anyone know any big ones? Can you think of any off the top of your head? So January 1st, Spain and Portugal joined the European community. All right. Anything big? Anything big? Kodak exits instant camera market after patent dispute. Space Shuttle Columbia STS-61C launch with first Hispanic American astronaut. Okay, here we go. 1986, January 18th. We all remember this. The Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. Where were you? I was in school, and that was just creepy and bad and awful. My God, I'm still like seeing it in my head. Hold on. Sorry, having a little moment there. Little flashback of that whole thing. Let's see. Martin Luther King Jr. Day is the first federal holiday. We know that. Voyager 2, closest approach to Uranus. Let's see. So they're talking a lot about the Challenger disaster. There was a whole investigation launched into the Challenger. I don't know, you guys. I don't see anything that's out of the ordinary. Oh, here we go. People Power Revolution of the Philippines. I know we all remember that. Soviet launches the Mir space station. The U.S. Senate debates their first televised broadcast. So, what was, I guess, nothing big happened in 86. Like there wasn't like a tragedy, unless it's been erased from history. There wasn't any kind of like worldwide catastrophic event. Was this the year of Chernobyl? It's the year of Chernobyl. This is what I've been looking for. So if you're just tuning in now on the live, I'm talking about the Mandela effect, and I'm looking at all of the different years that things went wrong. Now, Nelson Mandela went to one prison from 1964 to 1982 and then was moved to another prison from 1982 to 1990. And I'm like, well, what has happened in these years? So 1986 sticks out in my mind because I feel like, it was later in the 80s when they told us Nelson Mandela died in jail, right? So now I'm trying to remember 86. I remember the Challenger disaster, but it was the same year as the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. So the power plant's operations began reducing power at reactor 4 in preparation for a critical safety test, and this was on April 25th, 1986. Now, this was strategically timed to coincide with a routine maintenance shutdown, but the seemingly routine procedure would soon lead to one of the most catastrophic nuclear accidents in human history. So on April 26th, 1986, the nuclear accident occurred at the Chernobyl power plant, and this is in Ukraine, but then it was part of the Soviet Union. During a maintenance test, the fourth reactor exploded due to pressurized steam in the cooling system, releasing approximately 9 tons of radioactive material into the atmosphere. The nearby city of Pripyat was immediately evacuated, and the damaged reactor was eventually entombed under 5,000 tons of concrete. The immediate accident resulted in the unaliving of 31 people, but long-term consequences were devastating. An estimated 5,000 unalivings from cancer and tens of thousands exposed to significant radiation, and vast territories were contaminated. Now, on April 27th, the entire city of Pripyat and the surrounding areas in Ukraine are urgently evacuating following the nuclear accident at the Chernobyl power plant. So this has been, up till now, one of the most significant environmental and human safety disasters, and it still is in modern history. Now, by April 28th, high levels of radiation were detected in Sweden. And this was from the disaster. And this international detection forced Soviet authorities to publicly acknowledge the accident, marking a significant moment in the global understanding of the Chernobyl nuclear accident. The radiation detection highlighted the far-reaching and environmental and health impacts of what happens with these nuclear disasters. So now on May 1st, this is when the Soviet news agency TASS reports that Chernobyl had an accident in their nuclear plant. And this, again, now marked a very significant moment in global nuclear safety history. The report signaled the beginning of understanding the catastrophic nuclear accident that occurred in Ukraine. And then 6 days after, this is on May 2nd, the entire city of Chernobyl was evacuated. 6 full days they waited to evacuate, and this marked a critical moment in one of the worst nuclear disasters in human histories, with residents being forcibly relocated to prevent further radiation exposure. And to me, there is possibly the chance that if you believe in timelines and time really does not end and the world actually does not end, it just keeps going into a different timeline. What if the reason we believed Nelson Mandela passed away in prison in the 80s is because he actually did? But this Chernobyl accident happened and it actually did more damage to the world than we knew. And that whole world really did end. And we slipped into this timeline where Nelson Mandela was alive, but the Monopoly man had no monocle. Now, I could be completely insane, and that's totally fine. Agree with me, disagree with me. I don't care. I'm here to make you think. I'm here to have a little bit of fun in the world and make you think about some things, because this is a big deal. Now, without Nelson Mandela being freed from prison, apartheid probably would not have ended, because May 16th of 1986, South African President P.W. Botha sends Minister of Justice Kobe Coetzee to visit Nelson Mandela, signaling potential early steps toward negotiations to end apartheid. And by May 18th, the South African army conducted a significant military occupation, occupying territories in Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Zambia. This event highlights the complex geopolitical tensions and military interventions during the apartheid era in South Africa. So it's interesting to me, because what if this event at Chernobyl helped to send us into another timeline where apartheid was being abolished, you know? I mean, you never know. Anything could happen. Western powers were blocking sanctions on South African apartheid regime. So that's us, that's the United States. On May 23rd, the United States and Western European nations vetoed proposed stronger economic sanctions against South Africa, effectively maintaining diplomatic and economic support for the apartheid government, despite growing international pressure for change. So I really find this all so very interesting. And also, that year on May 21st, U.S. nuclear tests at Nevada test site. They conducted a Cold War era nuclear weapons testing program. These underground nuclear tests were part of an ongoing strategic and technological competition with the Soviet Union aimed at maintaining and demonstrating nuclear capabilities. And this comes just weeks after the Chernobyl disaster. So it makes you think, was this disaster worse than we thought it was? And then all of a sudden we're in this timeline and everything is so incredibly strange. There's so much more to this, but I'm just kind of interested in this theory. And I thank you guys for joining me on this live. You know that you can always catch up on Spotify and YouTube. Thanks for joining me in the den on this episode. I am the Gothic Rose. Have a great new year.